Once upon a time, in a small village nestled at the edge of a dense forest, there lived a young woman named Kichu. Kichu was a bright and determined medical student, known for her kind heart and unwavering dedication to helping others. One fateful evening, as the moon hung high in the sky, Kichu found herself walking home after a late visit to her boyfriend Yugo's house. The night was unusually quiet, the only sounds being the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. As Kichu made her way along the deserted road, she noticed a figure slumped by the roadside. Concerned, she hurried closer and discovered a young pregnant woman, her face pale and twisted with pain. The woman, who introduced herself as Omo, was clearly in distress. With a voice trembling from both pain and fear, Omo whispered, "Please help me. I have nowhere to go. My father disowned me when I became pregnant." For more captivating African tales and legendary stories, subscribe to Cheese African Tales. Join our growing community and never miss an enchanting tale from Africa's rich storytelling tradition. And my mother died while giving birth to me. I've been wandering the streets, but now I can't walk any further. The pain, it's unbearable. Kichu's heart ached for Omo. Despite the late hour and the danger of being out at night, Kichu couldn't leave her there. "Don't worry, I'll help you," Kichu said gently. "My home is too far from here, but we can go to my boyfriend Yugo's house. It's nearby, and we can figure something out there." Omo nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face, and with great effort, she stood up, leaning heavily on Kichu for support. Together, they slowly made their way to Yugo's house. When they arrived, Yugo opened the door, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Kichu, who is this, and why have you brought her here at this hour?" Kichu quickly explained the situation. "This is Omo. She's homeless, pregnant, and in desperate need of help. I couldn't just leave her out there alone. Please, Yugo, we need to help her." Yugo hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "But Kichu, we don't even know her. What if something goes wrong? Why didn't you take her to a hospital?" "I couldn't leave her on the street, Yugo," Kichu replied, her voice filled with urgency. "She's in labor, and there's no time to take her anywhere else." Just as they were discussing what to do, Omo let out a piercing scream, clutching her belly as she doubled over in pain. Kichu rushed to her side, realizing that Omo's water had broken and the baby was coming. The situation had become critical. "I need to help her deliver the baby, Yugo," Kichu said firmly, her medical training kicking in. "There's no time to lose." Yugo, seeing the seriousness of the situation, nodded reluctantly and helped Kichu guide Omo inside. They quickly cleared space on the living room floor, and Kichu began to prepare for the delivery. She spread out a clean sheet and instructed Omo to lie down, her voice calm and steady despite the tension in the air. "Omo, I need you to focus and push with all your might," Kichu said, holding Omo's hand. "I know you're exhausted, but if you don't push, both you and your baby could be in danger. You can do this. I'm here with you." Omo, her face drenched in sweat, nodded weakly. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, she began to push. The pain was overwhelming, and Omo felt as though she had nothing left to give, but Kichu's encouraging words kept her going. With a final, desperate push, the cries of a newborn baby filled the room. The sound was both miraculous and haunting, echoing through the small house. Kichu carefully cut the umbilical cord, setting the placenta aside. She cleaned the baby and wrapped it in a soft blanket before bringing it to Omo. "You did it, Omo," Kichu said softly, her voice filled with admiration. "You have a beautiful baby." But as Kichu held the baby close to Omo, she noticed that the new mother was eerily still. "Omo," Kichu whispered, but there was no response. Panic surged through her as she placed her ear close to Omo's chest. There was no heartbeat. Omo had passed away, her strength spent in bringing her child into the world. Kichu's hands began to tremble as the realization hit her. She hurried to the living room where Yugo was sitting, her face pale with shock. Yugo, she's dead. Omo is dead. What are we going to do? Yugo, though shaken, tried to remain composed. Kichu, calm down. She's a stranger, and there's no one we can call for help at this hour. If we contact the authorities, they might blame us for her death. It's late, and the police might think we had something to do with it. But we can't just leave her body here, Yugo. What if someone sees us trying to dispose of it? What about the baby? Kichu's voice was filled with desperation. Yugo sighed deeply, weighing the options. We'll keep the baby, but we'll have to get rid of Omo's body. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it, Kichu. You need to trust me. Reluctantly, Kichu agreed, knowing she had little choice. She took the baby into the bedroom and began writing a list of medications they would need to care for the newborn. Meanwhile, Yugo wrapped Omo's body in a white cloth and carried it to his car. He placed the body in the trunk and hid the placenta in a plastic bag. However, Yugo had other plans. As he drove through the silent streets, he made a call to a mysterious number. After several rings, an elderly man answered, his voice gruff and irritated. Why are you calling me at this hour? The old man growled. I've told you before, you must fulfill the spirit's demands, or you will go mad within 10 months. Yugo spoke quickly, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Something unexpected happened. I have the fresh body of a recently deceased mother and her baby's placenta. I thought you might be interested. The elderly man's tone changed instantly, becoming more animated. Bring them to my shrine immediately. This is a rare opportunity. Kichu and Yugo had been in a relationship since Kichu was admitted to the university. They had known each other for over a year before becoming romantically involved. Both came from humble backgrounds, but Kichu had always been content with her life. She loved Yugo deeply and had promised to support him no matter what. This bond had made Yugo treasure Kichu with all his heart. However, things had taken a dark turn when, a month ago, Yugo ran into an old friend from high school named Odi. Adi had become wealthy, driving a luxurious car and living a life of excess. When he spotted Yugo in the market, he insisted on taking him to an upscale restaurant, where they reminisced about their school days and the paths their lives had taken since. Yugo was deeply shocked by the opulent lifestyle Ad was leading. The sight of Ad's wealth, his luxurious car, expensive clothes, and carefree attitude stirred something in Yugo. He felt a surge of curiosity and envy, which he could no longer contain. Ad, you have to tell me how you became so rich, Yugo said, his voice laced with urgency. Ad sighed, a troubled look crossing his face. Yugo, some stories are better left untold. Trust me, you're better off continuing your life as a petty trader. Keep struggling with Kichu, and eventually, success will find you. It may take time, but it's the honest way. But Yugo wasn't satisfied with this answer. I don't want to keep struggling, Ad. I want to be rich like you. I want the fancy cars, the big mansions, the life of comfort. Please, help me. Ad looked at his friend with a mixture of pity and regret. Yugo, I took a shortcut in life, and I'm regretting it every day. I wish someone had warned me like I'm warning you now. The price you have to pay is not worth it. But Yugo was insistent. Let me be the judge of that, Ad. Just tell me what I need to do. I'm willing to pay any price to be wealthy. Despite his initial resistance, Ad eventually caved under Yugo's relentless pressure. Alright, Yugo, he said reluctantly, meet me tomorrow, and I'll take you to someone who can help you. The next day, Yugo lied to Kichu, telling her he was traveling to another state to buy goods for his business. Instead, He met with Ad, who took him on a long journey to a remote village far from the city. The roads were rough and winding, leading them deep into a forest until they reached a secluded compound where an old, powerful witch doctor lived. Upon their arrival, Ad introduced Hugo to the witch doctor. "Baba, this is my friend Hugo. He's desperate to become wealthy, just like me. He says he's willing to pay any price." The witch doctor eyed Hugo with a penetrating gaze. "Do you understand what you're asking for, young man? Once the spirits give you a task, there's no turning back. You must fulfill it, or you'll pay a price far greater than you can imagine." Hugo, driven by greed and desperation, nodded. "I'm ready, Baba. I'll do whatever it takes." The witch doctor handed Hugo a small calabash and some herbs, instructing him to shake the herbs inside the calabash, blow into it, and then close it. Hugo did as he was told, his hands trembling slightly. The witch doctor then peered into the calabash, muttering incantations under his breath. Suddenly, he began to laugh, a sound that sent chills down Hugo's spine. "For you to become rich," the witch doctor declared, "you must bring me the placenta of a newborn baby and the corpse of the baby's mother." Hugo felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. The very thought of killing someone, let alone a mother and her newborn, was too horrifying to comprehend. He wanted to refuse, to run away and forget the whole thing, but the witch doctor's next words stopped him cold. "You have 10 months to fulfill this task, or the spirits will drive you mad. There is no escape." As they left the witch doctor's hut, I tried to reassure Hugo. "Don't worry, Hugo. We can get what the witch doctor asked for from a hospital. We don't have to harm anyone directly." But Hugo wasn't comforted. The idea of having blood on his hands, even indirectly, haunted him. "If I had known the price was someone's life, I would never have come this far." Ad, sensing Hugo's growing fear, warned him once again. "It's either you do this, or you lose your life. I told you from the start that this would be difficult, but you insisted you were ready to do anything." Hugo, deeply troubled, returned home that night but found no peace. The witch doctor's words echoed in his mind, robbing him of sleep. When he finally drifted off, he was plagued by a nightmare. In the dream, he was at a grand celebration held in a magnificent mansion. People were dancing, and the air was filled with music and laughter. At the center of the event was a large, ornate white casket decorated with gold. Curious, Hugo pushed his way through the crowd to see who was inside the casket. To his horror, he saw his own lifeless body lying there. Above the mansion was a banner with his picture and the words, "The Rich Madman." Panic seized him, and he tried to run, but someone grabbed his hand, holding him back. Hugo awoke with a start, drenched in sweat. Kichu was beside him, holding his hand. "I heard you screaming in your sleep. Are you okay? Can you tell me what happened?" she asked, concern etched on her face. But Hugo couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. His greed had led him into a nightmare from which he couldn't wake up. From that night on, he found it impossible to sleep soundly. Ad had even told him that the witch doctor he relied on had been arrested, meaning Hugo would have to find the corpse of a pregnant woman and the baby's placenta on his own. One evening, as Hugo lay on his bed, consumed by dark thoughts, Kichu visited him with urgent news. She revealed that she was pregnant and that her faith forbade her from getting an abortion. Hugo was initially happy to hear this, but his joy quickly turned to horror as he realized the implications. The witch doctor had warned him that he could never have a child of his own, or he would die instantly. In that moment, Hugo made a terrible decision. He resolved to kill Kichu when her pregnancy was due and use her placenta and body to fulfill the witch doctor's demands. However, when Kichu returned later that night with Ormo, a pregnant woman, it presented Hugo with an even more immediate opportunity. After Kichu had fallen asleep with the newborn baby, Yugo took Omo's body and the placenta to the witch doctor. The witch doctor performed the ritual and assured Yugo that he would soon become wealthy. However, he warned Yugo once again, you must not have a child of your own. If you do, you will lose your life instantly. When you die, your empire will crumble to ashes. Yugo had no choice but to accept the witch doctor's conditions. When he returned home, he found Kichu sleeping peacefully beside the baby. They looked like mother and daughter, so serene and innocent. But Yugo, now consumed by greed, saw only a threat to his own life. He remembered that if Kichu gave birth to his child, it would mean his own death. Driven by fear and desperation, Yugo crept into the kitchen and took a knife. His heart was heavy with darkness, his mind clouded by greed and the desire to survive. He had forgotten all that Kichu had done for him, how she had stood by him through every hardship. Now, he was ready to end her life and that of the innocent child. As he approached the bed where Kichu and the baby lay, he heard a loud bang on the door. The noise startled him, and he quickly hid the knife on the nearby table. The banging continued, loud enough to wake Kichu, though the baby remained asleep. Together, Yugo and Kichu went to answer the door. When they opened it, they were met by a woman with tear-streaked eyes, accompanied by 2 policemen. The woman's eyes were bloodshot, her face lined with the pain of grief and worry. "We are deeply sorry for disturbing you at this hour," one of the policemen said, "but we are searching for a young pregnant woman named Omo. People in the area said she was last seen around here." Kichu felt her heart race, fear gripping her like a vice. She glanced at Yugo, who subtly gestured for her to stay calm. "A pregnant woman in this vicinity?" Yugo asked, feigning ignorance. "I just returned from disposing of some trash, and I didn't see anyone like that." The woman's face fell with disappointment, and the policeman began to turn away. But before they left, the woman looked directly at Kichu and asked, "My daughter, have you seen my daughter? She's about your height, maybe your age, and she was heavily pregnant." The woman's voice quivered with a mix of fear and desperation. "She's still to enter labor anytime now. She's my only daughter, my only daughter." The sorrow in her words pierced Kichu's heart, and she could feel the weight of the woman's anguish. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes, and Kichu's empathy deepened, but Yugo subtly gestured for her to feign ignorance. "I'm really sorry, Ma," Kichu replied, her voice soft but steady. "I haven't seen your daughter either, but I pray and hope that you find her. I really hope she's safe." The policemen thanked them for their time and moved on to question the other residents. However, Kichu couldn't take her eyes off the woman, the image of her tear-streaked face burning into her mind. She felt an overwhelming sense of pity and pain, knowing the woman's grandchild was with her at that very moment. Despite the guilt gnawing at her, she couldn't say anything. Yugo had warned her, they would both be arrested if they revealed the truth. What was that all about out there? Yugo hissed as soon as the policemen were out of earshot, anger flashing in his eyes. "Were you planning to confess right in front of the police?" Kichu remained calm, her gaze drifting towards the sleeping baby in the other room. "What have you done with the cops? Did you get the drugs? I didn't even notice when you returned. You took a while." "I had to go far so no one would see me," Yugo lied smoothly, his face a mask of sincerity. "I've disposed of the cop's body and bought the drugs." Kichu believed him, her mind too overwhelmed with the events unfolding around her to question him further. The next day, Kichu decided to stay home from school. She needed to take care of the baby. When she switched on the television, the first channel she tuned to was covering the story of Omo, the young pregnant woman whose baby she now cared for. The broadcast described Omo as the only child of Mr. and Mrs. Nomi, a once wealthy family. The narrative took a tragic turn when Mr. Nomi's container of goods fell into the sea, uninsured. The financial loss was so devastating that it led to Mr. Nomi developing a severe heart condition, requiring an urgent transplant. Omo, only 17 at the time, had been a beacon of hope for the family. They were fortunate to find a heart donor, but the cost of the surgery was beyond their means. Mrs. Nomi, desperate to save her husband, turned to a wealthy man named Alhaji for help. He agreed to lend them the money, but under one condition: Omo would be betrothed to him. If Mrs. Nomi could repay the loan with interest within 2 years, she could reclaim her daughter. If not, Omo would become one of his many wives. When Mrs. Nomi informed Omo of the arrangement, the young girl didn't flinch. She agreed immediately, driven by her love for her father and a willingness to do whatever it took to save his life. Unfortunately, despite their sacrifices, the transplant failed, and Mr. Nomi died on the operating table. The loss was shattering, but the debt remained. Mrs. Nomi was forced to pay Alhaji back, or she would lose Omo forever. 2 years slipped by, and Mrs. Nomi couldn't gather the funds. Alhaji wasted no time in making Omo, now 19, his 9th wife. Omo's youth and beauty sparked jealousy among Alhaji's other wives, who conspired against her. When Omo became pregnant, Alhaji had to travel abroad for an extended period, leaving her at the mercy of the other wives. They tormented her, depriving her of food and peace. Unable to return to her mother due to the marriage agreement, Omo endured until her pregnancy reached 8 months. Fearing for her life and her unborn child, she fled. Omo wrote to her mother, informing her of her condition, but received no response. She wandered the streets for days, without food or water, until Kichi found her. Malnourishment forced her into early labor, ultimately costing her life. By the time Mrs. Nomi received Omo's letter, it was too late. Ever since, Mrs. Nomi had been searching the streets, desperately seeking her only daughter. Kichi was shaken to the core by the revelation. Tears flowed freely as she stared at the television screen, piecing together the tragic story of the young woman whose child now slept in her home. Yet, she found it strange that Omo's baby, unlike most newborns, was eerily calm, rarely crying. As she fed the baby with the supplies Hugo had brought, Kichi began to contemplate whether to report to the police. Meanwhile, Hugo and his associate, Ode, were at the witch doctor's house once more. The witch doctor congratulated Hugo for taking the necessary actions. He reminded Hugo of the conditions he had agreed to. Hugo must never have a child. If any woman bore him a child, that child's life would replace his own. Hugo nodded, accepting the witch doctor's terms, but he was naive to think that a deal with the devil would be fair. One more thing, the witch doctor added, his voice grave. Every decade, you must bring someone into the circle. You must convince them to do as you have done, or you will lose your sanity. It was then that Hugo understood why Ode was still single and childless, despite his immense wealth. Hugo realized that their meeting had not been by chance. Ode, having exhausted his 10-year period, desperately needed someone new to join the circle. Hugo, struggling to achieve success in life, had been his perfect target.